Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
Americans, how do you feel about the firing of 20% of 4-star generals? Prior service Marine Corps here. I can say, the constant change of the people in charge in Afghanistan was part of the reason we fought for the same ground multiple times. New command, new strategy. First general would surrender a hill, next would want that same hill 6 months later. The constant rotation of chiefs was necessary so that each one got a ribbon to pin on and could write a book about how they succeeded in war. The need for good leadership in the military cannot be overstated, but that leadership needs to be multifaceted, with a focus on mission accomplishment. Not a banner claiming mission accomplishment, but actual accomplishment. There needs to be accountability. What we have is a rotation and a pipeline to the level of general. It should require extraordinary feats by extraordinary people who can hold public trust to reach that level, not a rotation. Not a line of people waiting their turn. There is fat to cut, but in that fever of cutting we shouldn't remove what is vital to the endurance of liberty. Worth noting that he's already fired the TJAGS for each branch of the military. Those were the top lawyers who advise on the legality of orders. Relevant quote from the Secretary of Defense. Hegseth told reporters Monday that the removals were necessary because he didn't want them to pose any roadblocks to orders that are given by a commander-in-chief. He's done the same with the FBI, CIA, NSA, DOJ, and DHS. It's a coup, y'all. Hegseth told reporters Monday that the removals were necessary because he didn't want them to pose any roadblocks to orders that are given by a commander-in-chief. How can people not interpret that as the beginning of a hostile takeover? He's too dumb to even try to spin it. Removed? No. The Second Amendment is in place to prevent tyranny such as publicly funded health care or mildly higher taxes. It's not there to protect due process, elections, rule of law. Apparently. It's a coup. I'd say we're in the purge part. The official coup will be when Donnie finds a reason to declare martial law and never relinquishes power. Finds? You mean creates. Americans, how do you feel about the firing of 20% of 4-star generals? I feel that the Pentagon entirely failed to defend against the Kremlin's meme warfare, hybrid warfare, psychological warfare. Further, that the entire population has abandoned their civic duty to intellectually defend. Instead, people have readily consumed the Cambridge Analytica payloads and adopted the outgroup hate patterns conditioned in those 5,000 fiction storytelling patterns. Americans have not only failed in their civic duty to take up intellectual arms and rescue, educate those mentally damaged by Russia, they have embraced and extended the Russian hybrid warfare to amplify the dehumanization and total mockery. People have picked up the weapons of the enemy and duplicated them using social machines, promoting hate harder, and USA people attack USA people without any resistance to Russia. People have adopted bad. Anti-goodness abounds, anti-understanding abounds, mockery abounds, anti-empathy abounds, hate abounds. Social media ate my nation's face. The Cold War never ended in Russia's eyes and the US just lost part 2. The Cold War never ended in Russia's eyes and the US just lost part 2. I'm American, and it never ended in my eyes. We sure didn't disarm and stop mutually assured destruction. One thing you'll notice is they're systematically removing as many non-whites and women as they can from senior military, executive leadership. These people are very much segregationists who think anyone who's not a white man is presumptively unfit for command. They are still butthurt about the Civil War. It never ended. Very worried, because he is going to replace them all with yes men who will likely sign off on his most insane ideas without question. No more checks on his power, no more generals who will put country and constitution above the whims of a wannabe dictator. A key distinction to make is that he isn't replacing them with anyone. It's just that the remaining ones left will likely be the ones that align with current POTUS policy more. Whatever that means. So just thinning the herd until the only ones left are bootlickers. Just as great. By a commentator from Fox and Friends. Don't forget this decision isn't being made by a person who understands the military or why things are the way they are. In addition, please be aware the military is audited constantly by qualified individuals who help to determine why and what we need to maintain our trillion-dollar annual investment. The Pentagon has failed 7 audits in a row, unable to account for billions. A billion is 0.1% of the trillion. It sounds like a lot. And it is a lot of money. But it's also relative. If I have 1,000 and can't account for $1 of it by the end of the year, what does this mean for our military readiness? Has he left institutional knowledge and qualified people to keep our military ready to protect us? Or is this just about keeping Trump in power? It's bad for military readiness. Very bad. The reason we have so many high-ranking generals is because it takes an entire career, millions of dollars and years of experience to train an effective military commander. So once you have one, you want them to serve as long as possible and be available for as long as possible. That means promoting them to a higher rank, like a 4-star general, and putting them in charge of something that does not necessarily need a 4-star general in charge but will still benefit from it. Then, if the situation ever arises where we need a mass mobilization and the military needs to drastically expand in size, you already have tons of senior leadership ready and trained, with the skills, knowledge and experience to lead this rapidly expanding military. Any fresh recruit can be taught to fire a rifle. You can fill a million's pairs of hands with a gun, teach them how to shoot, and ship them out in less than a year. But you can't take a fresh recruit, pack 20+ years of military leadership experience into their brain, and promote him to a high-ranking position that desperately needs filled. We were taught this exact lesson in WW2. Before the war, the military was extremely lean on leadership. Then we entered the largest war known to man, started to rapidly expand, and very quickly realized, oh fuck, we don't have anyone who knows how to effectively lead these new recruits. Not an American, but learned some new relevant info. I didn't realize there are only around 40 total 4-star generals in the US military, so a 20% reduction is only like 8 people. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Trump knew what 8 people he wanted out a long time ago. And to get to 4 stars takes a long and distinguished career. Long enough that a certain percent of that 40 is given mandatory retirement every year or two. This is only slightly above average. There's a highly upvoted comment on this thread claiming 4-star is given out as a retention tool lol. This thread is full of people who have no understanding of the military but have a ton of confidence. We had 12 4-star generals during World War II. I'm not convinced that going down to 32 will noticeably hurt the military. It would actually be going from 38 to 30 or 31. Definitely not a world-ending change IMO. If you wanted to turn the US military on its own people, this would be a necessary step. There's way too many military personnel married to civilians for anything to lead to something other than a civil war. A lot of military folks are against Trump because he's getting rid of their friends and well-liked superiors. I doubt the military would listen to him. And if some factions will form. People said the same thing during Shays' rebellion early into the US as a nation. US soldiers wouldn't raise the guns and fire at their own fellow Americans to put down the rebellion. But that's exactly what they did. It's a Russian coup. Cold War never ended. We are losing badly. I've been saying for months, a lot of Trump's more baffling and senseless decisions make a hell of a lot more sense if you stop looking at him as an American who is trying to help Americans, or even as a relatively neutral party who is just looking out for himself, and instead look at him as a Russian foreign asset whose job is to actively destabilize the US and its allies as much as possible. The goal here is to eliminate the senior level gatekeepers. This way the administration has more latitude to order the military to undertake tasks which go against the spirit, if not the letter of the law, and encounter less opposition to those orders. It's that simple. Putin's puppet doing what puppets do. The comments in here got me worried. We need to make America great again. As someone who recently retired from more than 20 years of military service, I have been hoping to see a mass reduction in generals since Obama first took office, so in my opinion it's long overdue and honestly not enough of a reduction. There was an excellent paper written on the problem by an officer attending Air War College that got published called The Rise of the General Shogunate, and it really opened my eyes to just how insanely bloated the military has become at the top levels. I can't find it now though. I tried, so to answer the question, I heard the news and said aloud, it's about damn time. Though it's only truly helpful if those positions also disappear and they aren't backfilled. I can see from the other comments here though, that I'm about to be downvoted into oblivion for this hot take. Hilarious to see the difference in the Reddit comments coming from people who actually have military backgrounds versus those who have zero experience. Every single comment coming from someone who served is supportive of these cuts. No wonder inverse Reddit is so accurate. Yeah, and it's not possible that both are true. The military does need a reduction in senior leadership and the administration is using that excuse to get rid of those that would disagree with them most. Former AF. I'd say it would be good if the people doing the reduction have honorable intentions. However, I doubt that's the case here. Ridiculous. No one knows whether this is good or bad because the intent isn't yet known, and neither is the outcome. I'm a vet, and have no idea if this is good or bad because there isn't enough information. I saw the same thing during my time in the army. The amount of bloat at the higher levels is crazy. It was not uncommon to see high-level officers given some BS job at HQ that consisted of them being in an office doing a token amount of work until they hit 20 years and retired. I remember one fat sack of shit 07 whose whole job was to be in charge of the flag detail at Division HQ, which was all of 10 minutes of work a day. I think it is not so much the numbers as the selection of who to remove. Also, if there is a large war where there is a need for more top people, I believe AI will be subbed in. People trained to fight the last war slow the transition to the new fighting methods. With the pace of change, a war could be lost before we realize horses are no longer relevant. Air Force of 10 years here. This is one of the rare things I agree with Hegseth with. We have a relatively small military force compared to our population of around 1.3 million-ish service members. In context, we had over double that in Vietnam and over 12 million in WW2. Yet today, the Army alone has more 4 stars than in any point of our US history, and that's just one out of the now 6 branches. We are so top-heavy it's hard to even argue the disproportionate ratio to troop levels. Thanks for the context. I've seen many people from across the political spectrum call for a reduction in generals and other senior officers. 20% would be 7 to 8 of 38.